Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Today we are going to talk about Buddhist mysticism or mysticism in Buddhism. Now this word mysticism in its original meaning is a word that expresses a kind of ignorance, that mystics are like a mountain that is clouded with mist and we cannot see the mountain. In a similar way, the mystic cannot be understood because whatever the mystic says, the ordinary person is not able to understand properly. But today, when people write books on mysticism, they always talk about a very important thing that they believe in, that is that the soul of a person wants to unite with God. So it is a union between the soul of a person and God. So that is how the mystics or the mystic writers or writers on mysticism try to explain this. Now Buddhism being a religion that is not theistic, it is really humanistic. We don't say that Buddhism is theistic or anti-theistic. We say that Buddhism is a humanistic religion. What this means is we don't talk about theology. We don't talk about God. We talk about psychology. We talk about the mind. And the mystical states are explained in Buddhism as psychological states. That's the important thing to understand. This doesn't mean that Buddhism has no mysticism. Whatever is called mysticism is seen in Buddhism as a psychological state of mind, a mystic state. So what this means is that when the mind is purified, the purity of mind is achieved in degrees. There are 5 impurities of the mind which has to be removed. The 5 impurities must be removed. And these are what are called the 5 hindrances: Kama, Chanda, Vyapada, Tina, Midda, Uddhacha, Kukkucha and Vichikicha. Kama, Chanda means the desire for sensual pleasure. Vyapada is anger and hatred. And Tina, Midda is laziness and sleepiness. And Uddhacha Kukkucha refers to worries and anxieties. And Vichikicha really refers to a divided state of the mind where the mind is wavering. This is really the conflict between our emotions and our reason. Very often our emotions want to do one thing and our reason says, no, that is not the way to do, this is the way to do. So this conflict is the Vichikicha. And of course it can be interpreted in various ways, but ultimately when we begin to understand it, it begins to become really a conflict between our emotions and reason. So once we get rid of these impurities, the mind becomes pure. That pure mind at the first stage is what is called the first jhana. The first jhana is a state of mental purity, and which is also a state of mental calm. When the mind is impure means these emotions that pollute the mind are really disturbances of the mind, and it is the absence of calmness of mind. So when the mind is purified, the mind becomes calm and tranquil. And when the mind is calm and tranquil, the muscles in the body begins to relax, because all emotional excitement, agitation creates tension in the muscles, and these tensions, when relaxed, we begin to feel comfortable. So we have the good thoughts in the mind, which is called vitakka and vichara. Vitakka vichara is the most fundamental way of forming a concept. When we form a concept, we really ask a question and we give an answer. If we say, what is this? Oh, this is a camera. Or what is this? This is a light. Now that kind of thinking is present, which is not emotional. The emotion is aroused only when we begin to think of enemies or something desirable. Then an emotion arises, like a desire for something, like lust. And then anger can be an emotion, or fears, or worries, anxieties. These are emotions which are disturbances of the mind. So when the mind is purified, we have thoughts, but thoughts means this is the breath coming in or this is the breath going out. That is a thought which is not a bad thought. It's not an impure thought. So pure thinking is there, that is vitakka vichara, and then we have piti. Piti means we feel happy. The happiness is due to the absence of emotional excitement. When the mind is calm and tranquil, the mind is also very happy. That happiness is not an excitement, it is a state of calm and tranquility. And that is what is called piti. And then with this comes the relaxation of the body, and as a result, a feeling of comfort. And that feeling of comfort is what we call sukha. So we have piti and sukha. Piti refers to the mental happiness, and sukha refers to the physical comfort. And ekaggata. Ekaggata means the unification of the mind. The mind is not divided into two, like the emotions pulling in one direction and reason pulling in another direction. We don't have a conflict there. When there is no conflict in the mind is unified and tranquil. That tranquility of the mind is the ekaggata. So when these factors, 5 factors there, vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha and ekaggata, when we have those 5 factors, they are called the jhanangas. They are the factors of the jhana. And then when those 5 factors of the jhana are present, we say that person is in the first jhana. And when we enter the second jhana, which is further state of tranquility, further tranquility, calm. That conceptual thinking, vitakka, vichara disappears. So we don't even form concepts. We don't think as what is this and this is such. We don't think like that. The mind is calmed down to that extent. But still the priti, the feeling of happiness and the comfort is there, and the tranquility of mind is there in the second jhana. When we enter the third jhana, the priti is also something that disappears. The priti, that feeling of happiness, although it is a state of calm, still that calmness at that point looks like or feels like a little disturbance. And so you make the mind tranquil to that extent when the feeling of happiness disappears. That doesn't mean that you become unhappy. It only means that that feeling of happiness has disappeared. But it is a feeling of peace and comfort. So there is the feeling of peace and comfort. That is at the third jhana. Now when we come to the fourth jhana, the comfort also disappears. The body is relaxed. That doesn't mean that the body becomes uncomfortable. What it means is that feeling of comfort, which is a pleasant feeling, disappears, and the feeling is a neutral feeling. And that neutral feeling and the tranquility of mind. So that is the perfect tranquility of the mind in the fourth jhana. Now that tranquility is further cultivated, and it becomes even more tranquil because at this point when we speak of the mind, there are these two aspects of the mind. One is called the affective and the other is called the cognitive. The affective part of the mind has been calmed down fully when we enter the fourth jhana. Still, the cognitive part of the mind has not calmed down enough. That means we are able to perceive objects. That's why they are called rupa. Rupa means we begin to see an image of something. So even that has to calm down. And when the mind calms down in the cognitive way, we cease to see any forms or rupas. And what we see is simply empty space. So seeing empty space, that is called akasananchayatana. Akasa means space, and akasa ananta means the infinite space, the sphere of infinite space. So that is a calming of the mind further. And we can calm the mind even further than that when even seeing empty space disappears. And we have only cognition itself, where we are aware of infinite cognition. That infinite cognition is simply an emptying of the mind to that extent. So the mind has been emptied to that extent. Now we can further calm the mind when we even give up even the awareness of cognition and then we get into a state called the sphere of nothingness. It's the emptiness. So the emptying of the mind gets emptied to the point where you are aware of nothingness. Now, the teachers of the Bodhisattva or Prince Siddhartha, when he went to learn meditation, Alara Kalama and Uddakarama Putta, they had reached that point. So the Buddha learned that up to that point, but he wanted to go further. And he could not find a person to teach other than Uddakarama Putta, who said, my teacher had entered a higher level, and I have not entered that level, but if you like, I can tell you what my teachers told me, and then you can try it yourself. And so he said, okay, and he tried further, and he entered the next stage of calm, and that is called the neither sensation nor no sensation. So it is somewhere like the end of the cognitive process, and it's like the threshold of cognition. And so that is the fourth ayatana, or it is ayatana is usually translated as the sphere of neither sensation nor no sensation. And then from there, the Buddha went on his own and went further than that in the cessation of sensation and feelings and sensations. Sanya Vedaita Nirodha is called. The cessation of feelings and sensations. Now at that point, the mind stops all activity, a complete state of tranquility where there is no activity going on as the mind. So it is at this point that the Buddha became perfectly sure that there is no such thing as a mind or a soul. What is called the mind is simply the activity of the body, which is the activity of the brain and the nervous system. So it's a state like a temporary hibernation. Now computers sometimes have a thing called hibernation. Now it's a thing like that, where the mind stops working, it is resting. That doesn't mean that the person is dead. There is a difference between the dead person and the person who has entered that state. The difference is that the dead body, the metabolic activities have stopped. But in the person who has entered this state of samadhi, the metabolic activity still goes on in the body, but the mental activity has completely stopped. So it can come back again. This is only a temporary hibernation. And once you wake up from that state, you are able to see how the mind begins to form everything. The mind is creating the whole, every experience that is being experienced. And so understanding that whole process is what is called the paticca samuppada, or it is the principle of psychic determinism, that the mind, the activity of the mind is also following the principle of determinism. Determinism means that when anything happens or occurs in the world, it is due to the presence of the necessary conditions. When the necessary conditions are present, it occurs. And when the necessary conditions, even one condition is absent, it ceases to occur. Like a flame. A flame, when it arises, it has to arise at a certain point. And so this is the description, the psychological way of explaining the mystical states in Buddhism. And these mystical states are not seen as a union between the soul and God. It is simply seen as a mental process, which is a gradual calming of the mind, a gradual process of calming the mind in the affective as well as the cognitive state. So I hope you understood, and may you all be well, comfortable, peaceful and happy. See whether, how many minutes is that? I don't know. So it is important to remember that when we speak about mysticism from a Buddhist point of view, we are not speaking about the soul uniting with God. We are only talking about a psychological process where the mind becomes purified, and we also begin to experience all kinds of sensations like happiness, joy, comfort and things like that, which the mystics begin to describe. Now if you read about Saint Teresa of Avila or Saint John of the Cross talking about their mystical states, they begin to describe the purification of the mind that they have been going through, and also the feeling of happiness or bliss or rapture or whatever words they use, and the feeling of comfort and all that. So we don't see that as union with God, but they might explain it as a presence of God that they are experiencing. But we would not put it like that. We would explain it as a psychological state. When the mind is purified, the mind feels happy, and the body relaxes, and as a result we feel comfortable. The body feels comfortable. So we don't picture it as God coming inside us or God coming close to us or anything like that. So this is why the Buddhist mysticism is more psychological, or the explanation is psychological rather than theistic. It's not a theistic explanation. It is a humanistic explanation of the mystical state. But this cannot be interpreted as absence of mysticism in Buddhism. It's simply a point of view, how you look at the same thing from a different point of view and seeing it in a different way. So this is something very important we should understand when we talk about mysticism in Buddhism. Buddhist mysticism is psychological rather than theistic or theological. So I hope we understood, and may you all be well and happy.